This is another area that we often see failures at. Pipe penetrations. In this case, it's a dryer vent. Now, what we used to do is we used to make sure that we could extend the dryer vent, or whatever it is, a hose bib, any round element. We'd make sure that we extended it out far enough that we could get a mounting block in back of it. No different than a light block. And we would flash that. We'd flash that into the weather barrier. We still do that, but we can go a step further, and we can actually, let me see if I can slide that in there just a little. We can actually put a two-piece flashing around here. Now, we're going to have more debate. I'll tell you right now, we're going to have more debate about this. This is essentially the detail we're looking for. We're going to go over the weather barrier on the bottom. We're going to lap the weather barrier on the top. No matter what I do, I'm always lapping the weather barrier over this. Remember? Shingle style, right? Okay. The illustration shows these components being installed in a vertical fashion. I've talked to several people here whose knowledge and experience I trust, and they all had issues with that detail. I'm not going to tell you that everything up here is 100%. There are different ways to do this. I don't like this vertical element, quite frankly. But you can do it horizontally, and this is really simple to do. What I did, I'm not going to lay it all out again, but what I did was I took a compass, I set it to the diameter of the dryer vent, and I laid this out. Now, on this piece, I've got exactly half a circle coming around. And the beauty of this, because we're flashing around projection, so it doesn't matter whether when we cut this, whether it's going to be installed vertically or horizontally, it's still going to work. This one is half the dimension, half the diameter of the vent, plus 2 inches, because we want 2 inches for the overlap. We'll cut it out. And this is where it's really handy to have a couple of different pairs of snips. I typically carry straights, which is what I'm using now, lefts and rights. And we use all of them, depending on the application. The straights are the most versatile, because I can cut in any direction, but they don't always give me the cleanest cut. So go around, and again, I'm giving myself a little bit of room so I can fit in around that pipe. That's a 4-inch diameter dryer vent. I actually set my compass to, I think, 4 1/8. So we can cut this like so. The same rules apply. I'm going over the weather barrier on the bottom. I'm going over on the top, but I'll slit it. All right. Let me shear this off so we can get a better shot at that. And this will be installed shingle style like the rest of them. And you've got all this protection around the vent, plus the mounting block that we'll put on. We'll flash the mounting block in as well. So we've got, again, multiple lines of defense. We've got the flashing on the mounting block. If it gets through there, we've got the flashing around the vent. And we'll seal around the perimeter of that penetration as well. And again, weather barrier coming across the top, shingle style. That's another area that we often see missed. One more. Electrical boxes. How many people flash an electrical box? Anybody? Anybody ever heard of it? Mounting block, yeah, but not just a mounting block. I'm talking about the actual electrical box itself. Now, this is a bit extreme, I'll grant you, but you guys are also building in a coastal environment here. And I'm well aware, I've got friends who build out here, that water travels uphill. I didn't used to believe that years ago. I've seen pictures, I've seen the evidence, I buy into it. This is kind of a belt and suspenders approach. The mounting block is fine. You still want to flash that mounting block, as we've been talking about. But it's really very easy to make a little piece of flashing for the electrical box. This is what it will end up looking like. This is not pretty. This is our prototype, but this is what we're going to be shooting for at the finished detail. The first one that we do is we lay out the box. Now I've cut these cards, we carry these cards, and we cut them roughly 6 by 8, depending on the size of the box, maybe 8 by 8, 12 by 12, whatever. We lay out the box on one of these flashing cards. The second thing we do is we'll add diagonal lines, 45-degree diagonal lines. We'll locate the center of the box, and you'll notice there are 2 sets of lines. You saw this before, because this one is going to be a hem. This will end up being a diverter. So we lay out, we've got our box layout, we've got our diagonal lines at each corner, going up and coming down, with room for a 3/8 hem. And I hit dead center coming across, measured up 3/8, marked another line. This is what it'll look like. And the beauty is, this only takes a few minutes to do. It sounds complicated, but it takes far longer for me to describe it than it actually does to do it. So I'll score these lines, the outer lines, with a utility knife. And then I can snap it free. Aluminum lends itself to this. That's what we have so far. Everybody with me? All right. Grab my snips. I'm going to cut up at each vertical intersection, up to my line. Left and right. Okay. Got that. We got that. We got one more. Get that out of the way. Okay. What I've done is I've released the material around the hems. I'll take the folding tool, and again, I've got a 3/8 setting on this tool, or a 3/8 notch. And I can slip the tool in there, and I can fold it like so. I'll do the same on the other side. It takes a little bit of patience, but it's completely doable. And there you have a little gutter. Install it. You can do the same on the bottom. It's not a bad idea to do it on the bottom because, again, if any water runs down around there, it'll direct it away from the box. The little pieces in the top will divert it away. Pieces in the bottom, excuse me, to the side. The pieces in the bottom will channel it to the side over there. One more thing that I like to do that's not shown in that illustration is I'll take a dab of sealant at the very top, and I'll put a dab right up at the top. It'll actually act as like a little diverter, a bead. And any water that runs down in there doesn't have a chance of getting dead center. It'll hit that bead of sealant and it'll be pushed to the sides. We'll flash the box, we'll install our block, our mounting block for the device itself. We'll flash that, multiple layers of defense. Again, when I install this, I'll slip the weather barrier and slip it in. I slid it a little high there, but slip it in there and bring it down in shingle style overlap. Tape it if you want. There's no water that'll get in that box. All right. Those are critical areas on walls that we've seen. Except for this next one that I'm going to show. This is probably the most damaging, outside of the ledger detail that we've talked about. This area is probably one of the most vulnerable spots you'll ever see on a house. I'm talking about where a roof comes down, yet doesn't continue all the way through. It's essentially stopped and butted into a wall. Everybody see that? This area right here. How do you deal with this? This wall comes through, you got a corner board. Let's say this is a corner. You got a corner board here. You got this area here. How do you flash that? Kick out flashing. People are nodding their heads. I love it. I ask this of people in different presentations we do. Very few people know what a kick out flashing is. A kick out flashing diverts the water away from that sidewall. Normally, what we see, vast majority of the roofers that we know will come in and install their step flashing on the sidewall, right? But that's the end of it. This piece, if it's not detailed properly, will push water in back of the siding. And worse yet, very often, what do? You'll lift that weather barrier, you'll slit the weather barrier, lift it up, right? Because we want it to overlap that flashing, and this point will end up directly in back of the weather barrier. It will divert all that runoff, all that water from that side right in back of the weather barrier. The damage is amazing. The good news is that kick-out flashings are amazingly simple to make. This is what one looks like. You need to bend a piece. Instead of 7 inches, you need to make it about 10. So let's just say that it's a 5 by 7 typically, and this would be a 5 by 10. On the back side of it, and I'm using a square here. We do this by eye, but I'm using a square so I can illustrate this. I strike a diagonal line, and that line is 7 inches to the intersection of the square. Does that make sense? So I'm still maintaining my 7-inch exposure, reveal, whatever you might want to call it, for running up the roof. It'll still fit on a standard shingle. I'll still have my proper overlap because this flashing is going to be cantilevered. So I measure 7 inches down. I strike a diagonal line, 45 degrees. Pair of snips. And you fold the flashing on itself like so. Now, you need to somehow seal this or attach it. You can rivet it. This one that I made this a couple of days ago, and I just used a good quality silicone and a spring clamp. You can do that. This will work, but you still have a really vulnerable point right here where you folded the aluminum on itself or the metal on itself. You can make these out of copper. I actually prefer copper. We'll sometimes make these and we'll solder them. That is about as good as it gets. If you do it, no matter what kind of material you use, the principles are all the same. We'll cut this back so that our finished flashing is like so. Okay? And I'm going to take the one that I made, and it gets installed on the sidewall on top of the first course of shingles, but remember the 7-inch mark. Let's say that's right here. The remaining, it's about 2 inches or so by the time you're done forming it and folding it. The remaining 2 inches or so projects beyond the wall. It acts as a kind of a gutter, and it'll divert the water away from that wall, away from that vulnerable point. You have another option these days, and that's to use a preformed flashing. You guys seen these? These are PVC kick-out flashings. They install in the same fashion as any of the other ones, but you see how big these things are? These give you a ton of protection, just a ton. And the nice thing is you can actually trim, because they're PVC, you can trim this to a profile that's not very objectionable. I've seen contractors leave these things, and it looks like a boot sticking out the corner of the roof. But if you install this and trim it, just trim it up a couple inches, cut this leg off, trim it up a couple of inches, it's really not very obtrusive. The nice thing is it's one piece. There's no soldering required, there's no sealing, there's no nothing required. No matter what you use something, is my point with all of this. And make sure that that particular area is protected.